Hello to everyone and anyone who may listen to this. This teaching was given on September 23rd, 2025 at the Spanish Language Institute in San Francisco dos Rios, Costa Rica. This teaching is on the Sabbath. And so the recording jumps into the middle of a question that I had asked at the beginning of the teaching. And the question is, what was the first thing that God sanctified in all of creation? Person, place, object, or something else. What was the first thing that God sanctified? So as you get ready to listen to this teaching, just be aware that the responses that students are giving are to that question that I had asked.
First thing he blessed was it after the animals were said to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth?
Okay, so he did bless the birds and then he blessed the humans, right?
Bless.
But you're
sanctified.
You're along the right path, though.
What?
You're along the right path. Josh?
I think the first act of where you actually see him sanctifying something is after Adam and Eve both sin, and then he makes the first sacrifice by clothing them. And so he obviously had two animals to clothe them, and they were clothed him. And so that was kind of their first, he was sanctifying their nakedness in a way, their vulnerability. So he kind of performed the first sacrifice there and then prophesied the fact that there will be an ultimate sacrifice down the road. So maybe that was potentially the first act of sanctification to something that was broken.
Okay, I love the explanation as far as God sanctifying their nakedness and the sacrificial act that he committed in those moments, not necessarily still the first thing that he sanctified. Again, love the explanation, but there was something that he sanctified before that specific moment. One more person want to give a whack? I did. Give it a try. Give it a shot.
Sabbath.
Hey, baby. Oh, Marcella. Okay, exactly. So we're about to read Genesis chapter 2, but the first few verses, God blessed that day, as Seth was saying, but then he also sanctified the seventh day. So we'll read it in just a moment. But for today, if you're taking notes, mental or physical, I titled this Sanctification, Liberation, and a Foretaste. And so I'm really hoping that you guys, three things today that you see, but ultimately with the hope that you guys go forward, either continuing to practice the Sabbath, if you already do it, or if you don't do it, or if you're like, we kind of do it, for you to really make this a spiritual discipline and practice in your household. And so sanctification, I'm hoping that you guys just see the holiness of the Sabbath. Secondly, I'm hoping that you guys see the Sabbath as a liberating gift to us. And you'll see more of that when we see the Sabbath in connection to the Israelites when they received the Ten Commandments. And then lastly, for you guys to see the Sabbath, it's really a foretaste of all of eternity, when we get to live fully in the eternal rest that God offers us. Not saying that we won't necessarily work in the next creation. I'm just saying there is a rest to be found in the Sabbath that is reflective of the eternity that awaits us. And so what does Sabbath mean? Literally, what does that word mean? Somebody tell me. It could be you again, Marcella, if you know it.
Rest.
Literally means just to rest. So, again, as I told you guys, we're going to go ahead and read the first three verses from Exodus chapter 2. Can somebody go ahead and read Exodus chapter 2, the first three verses? And voz alta.
On the screen?
Yeah.
All right. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work that he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done.
Thank you, Seth. So as you guys see here, rested, literally the word Sabbath, Shabbat. We see it as early as Genesis chapter 2. And as Seth said, once we see here that God blessed the seventh day, and then what did he do? He sanctified it. He made it holy. And so the first thing, it's interesting that we see in creation that was made holy, it's not a place, it's not an object, it's not a piece of land, it's not even a person. It's a moment in time, the seventh day. We're going to dive into that a little bit more in a moment. But group discussion, and really just some quick questions, because I want to say more of the group discussion for the end. But just like a show of hands, how many of you would say, like, yes, in my church growing up, or the church that you guys attended in the past or were part of, you would say, like, Sabbath was something that was talked about? Show of hands. If you, like, talked about regularly, okay? How many would say, it was talked about maybe, like, every once in a blue moon, every once in a while? Okay. How many of you would say, like, I almost never heard about the Sabbath from my congregation or people I was with?
I think it was just confused. You just equate it with Sunday.
It was just equated with Sunday.
So that's growing up like, oh, Sabbath, Sunday. That was the confusing thing. Like, oh, we're supposed to go to church.
Okay.
So, but the actual practice of Sabbath wasn't talked about.
All right, so let's do that question. How many of you guys would say, like, the actual practice of Sabbath was talked about in a local congregation, wherever you were part of the longest? How many of you say, like, yeah, the practice of Sabbath was, like, clearly communicated and clearly taught? What were you going to say, Jay?
I was going to say, wasn't it blue light laws back then?
Oh, yeah.
Where everything was, I mean, there used to be a time where stores
shut
were
down
closed
on
on Sundays. You know, but then as society changed, now you have almost a, despisement of the Sabbath.
Despisement. Ooh, that's good. Okay. Anyone else? You're like, yeah, our church was super clear in the practice of Sabbath, or are you guys like, they weren't really clear? Like, they talked about it, but it was just kind of equating with Sunday, and then didn't go beyond that. You guys agree with that sentiment, or do you feel like, no, like, our congregations went beyond that? I'm just curious. From y'all's background.
Yeah, I don't know if it was. It's been something that's been on my mind for the last several years, and I've had a lot of discussion around it, but I haven't seen it acted out in my own life or others in a way that was actually like done well. Actually, one interpretation that I heard that was somewhat interesting that kind of connected a little bit with me was Sabbath is a way of it shouldn't be viewed as just sitting on your butt all day, but it should be done as like a holy work, something that feels like it fills you with life. And so if there is something in your life that, oh, when I do this fills me up, and this gives me, like when I participate in this, when I do this, and that could be as simple as like the work of journaling or the work of doing art or something like that, or working in your garden. I don't know, something that is not a task.
Something's
that is
restful.
Like I have to do this because it's a chore.
Yeah.
No, it's like something that like just fills me with life when I work in my garden or when I do this or that. So that's one thing that I heard Sabbath described as, rather than I sit on my couch and I don't do
anything. I bet.
I consume Netflix.
Thanks for sharing, Josh. One more person, Marcella, go ahead.
Jewish community, aren't there Sabbaths like more laws, like you're not allowed to cook, you're not allowed to like.
So we'll get into that in a second.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
so
good.
So there's that extreme. So.
That's good.
Yeah, but I'll let you continue.
No, you're good. I'll share more at the end, but when I had gone to Israel, like the Jews, it goes so far as they won't even press the button for the elevator. So certain hotels, it will just stop at every floor and open automatically. And that's how far, and we could say extreme they take it, but that's how I would say dedicated they are to not working. And so we'll definitely get into that more. We'll have hopefully more group discussion at the end. So like I said, my hope for you guys today is I hope that you see Sabbath as holy or sanctified moment in time, that you guys see it as a liberating wedding gift, first and originally to Israel, but then consequently, we know it's something for all of mankind, not just for the nation of Israel. And then lastly, you may go, what are you trying to say with that last one? Overcoming the unconquerable nature of time. And so, like I said, it's a foretaste of eternity. And one thing that we can never, ever conquer as humans is time. Just yesterday, Brian at our Bible study had us write out our funerals, because the reality is we're all going to face death. Time's going to eventually end for each of us in this life, and then we're going to be in the next life, the next creation. And so with that being said, though, the Sabbath helps us to realize even though we can't conquer best time, we can live in a moment of time, hopefully with the Lord now, that's a foretaste of what's to come forever. And so sanctified time, the first point. Oh, I'm giving it away. Excuse me. Try not to give that away. Can't go back. Okay. Well, I thought the animation was going to come on the play. So I was going to ask you guys originally and have you guys respond. In what ways is the seventh day, the Sabbath, unique from the other 6 days of creation? So if you go and read, again, it's already up there, the 6 days of creation, there's a few things that stick out with the Sabbath, again, that makes it unique. Details that we either don't see with the Sabbath that we see in the other 6 days of creation, or details we see with the Sabbath that we don't see with the other 6 days of creation. So what do I mean? So, again, as Marcella and Seth already said, the Sabbath is the first thing that God makes holy. It's the first thing that he sanctifies in all creation. And then God also blesses the seventh day. Obviously, he blessed mankind. He blesses the birds even. But the Sabbath is unique from the other 6 days. And it doesn't say that God blessed the other 6 days. It only says that about the Sabbath. And then for each of the 6 days in Genesis 1, I'm sure you guys are familiar with it, there's this refrain, this phrase that appears. And there was evening and there was morning. The first day, the second day, the third day. Each day, each part would end with that saying. But with the Sabbath, that's not there. It's absent. There's no saying of, and then with the Sabbath, there was morning and there was evening. It's just we get into the Sabbath, we get into the creation of man, and that's a whole other theology interpretation that people say we're still living in the seventh day, we're still living in the Sabbath. So that could be a rabbit hole you explore. And then for the Sabbath, there's no couple or pair with it. Okay, what do I mean by that? And we'll get into this because I have a slide for this. But basically, if you read Genesis 1, you see that each day has a couple, or each day mirrors each other. It's a chiasm. So like day 1 reflects day 4, day 2 reflects day 5, and day 3 reflects day 6. But then the Sabbath, the 7th, is the odd man out. And so, again, we'll get into that moment so you guys can see it visually. And lastly, the Sabbath, again, when we think about holiness, when we think about something being sanctified, we usually think about like, oh, this is a holy place. Or even Moses went the burning bush, like take your sandals off because you're stepping on holy ground. We think about objects or people or places being holy, which is not incorrect. It's completely correct to think, especially us being God's people, saints, we're holy. But again, the first thing that God made holy, sanctified, wasn't an object, wasn't a person, it wasn't a place. It was a moment in time. Can somebody go ahead and read Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11? So again, this is, just for context, Exodus 20 is the first giving of the 10 Commandments. Remember, the Israelites had received the 10 Commandments twice. And it's interesting, we'll see this in a few moments. In the first giving of the 10 Commandments, God roots his reasons for the Israelites observing the Sabbath in creation. But then the second time he gives the 10 Commandments, and as they're recorded in Deuteronomy 5, he gives a different reason for them observing the Sabbath. But let's go ahead and read Exodus chapter 20. Can somebody go ahead and read it in
Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy.
So again, Exodus repeats the narrative of Genesis. He blessed the seventh day and he sanctified it. He made it holy. And again, this wasn't just liberating for the Israelites, but it was liberating for everyone around them, because what other society at that time basically said, hey, servants and slaves, you also get a day off? Nobody. But the Israelites, God says, hey, even those people, they need to have a day off. Nobody's to work 7 days a week. And so I want to read you guys a quote from, for me, what has been the most impactful book I've read on the Sabbath. And it's literally called The Sabbath, the book. So sanctifying the Sabbath is part of our imitation of God, but it also becomes a way to find God's presence. It is not in space, but in time, he writes. It's the daughter writing about her father at the introduction of the book. It is not in space, but in time, he writes, that we find God's likeness. In the Bible, nothing or place is holy by itself. Not even the promised land is called holy. While the holiness of the land and the festivals depends on the actions of the Jewish people who have to sanctify them, the holiness of the Sabbath, he writes, preceded the holiness of Israel. Even if people fail to observe the Sabbath, it remains holy. It is indeed a unique occasion at which the distinguished word kadosh, or kadosh, is used for the first time in the book of Genesis at the end of the story of creation. How extremely significant is the fact that it is applied to time, and God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. There is no reference in the record of creation to any object in space that would be endowed with the quality of holiness. And so again, not necessarily a question for us to respond to right now. At the end, we have time for group discussion. If you want to bring it up, you can. But the question is simply this: if the Sabbath is holy, and we do not treat it as holy, what in essence are we doing? Because again, regardless of whether or not we treat it or recognize it as holy, it's something that's going to be holy regardless of how we treat it. So the second big point I'm hoping for you guys to see is Sabbath as a liberating wedding gift. So let's think for a moment. When Israel received the Ten Commandments, why would the Sabbath have been a liberating gift? And before we turn to Deuteronomy 5, I want us just to think about the context. Again, Exodus, the Israelites, they were in slavery for how many years in Egypt? 400 years. For 400 years, what was the narrative? What did they believe about themselves? We're slaves. The narrative is our worth, our value is only in how much we produce, how much bricks, clay, mortar we produce for these Egyptians. And there was no rest for them. And they were just worked, and then they died. And that's how it continued for 400 years. For 400 years, these people thought their worth, their value was in their work, and they had no rest. And then here God comes, rescuing them from Egypt, sending them into a land of their own, as he promised. And then with these 10 commandments, the first 10 commandments that he gives them, one of them he says, unlike how you guys were in Egypt, unlike what the Egyptians made you do, you are not to work 7 days a week. Instead, 6 days a week. And the seventh you are to rest, because the Lord your God did it the same way. Can somebody go ahead and on their phone pull up Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 through 15, and read it out for us?
What, 12 to 15?
Yeah.
Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your ox or your donkey or any of your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day.
Okay, so I don't have it on the screen, but again, I want you guys to hear the differences. In Exodus, when they first received the Ten Commandments, the Israelites, what was God basing his reasoning in? He based it in creation. He said, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and made it holy. But then Jay, thank you for reading it for us. In Deuteronomy 5, what is God's reasoning after he tells them nobody should work, not even the slaves, not even the servants? He says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. So obviously there's a moment of authority and a moment of, hey, recognize I'm the one who saved you. But then also a moment of, in Egypt, that's how you lived. But you will no longer live as you are in Egypt. And so it's liberating because, again, when these Israelites are hearing the creation story, they're hearing, wait, we're made in the image of God, that our worth precedes the work or what we produce. And then lastly, that the God who rescued us doesn't have this expectation like Pharaoh and the gods of Egypt did, doesn't have this expectation that we work 7 days a week. Rather, he expects us to do what he did, to rest. Why? Because God is hoping that for them to see, and for us to see, and what I hope we all see today, that we need to learn when to say, enough is enough. Like, hey, I worked 6 days, now the seventh day is a time of rest. That we need to know when to look at our work and go, okay, it is good, or it is very good, and now it is time for rest. And that's what he had hoped for the Israelites to see too, that your work, we have to learn that stopping point. And we have to learn to recognize our worth is not based on what we produce, nor on our work. And so going back to Genesis for a moment, I was referencing that each day has a couple or a pair. So again, go and read Genesis for yourself. Like you'll see, I'm not saying a chiasm, it's basically a literary device that it's employed throughout the scriptures by the Hebrew minds, by the Jews, that basically in a chiasm, they structure it in such a way that they're hoping for us, the readers, to see something either in the middle of the chiasm or at the end, something that they're really hoping to point out to us. So again, for Genesis, we see this theme of partnership or of likeness, of things mirroring one another. So we see it with the days, we see it with mankind. So in Genesis, day 1, God makes the light and darkness. But then what does he do in day 4? He fills those days, he fills the creation with the sun, moon, and stars. So day 1, he separates, he says, let there be light, then he separates the light from the darkness. And then day 4, he fills it with the sun, moon, and stars. Day 2, God separates the waters, he puts the waters below and the waters above. And then day 5, he fills the waters with birds. So I'm going to fill the waters above with animals that fly. And I'm going to fill the waters below with fish. And then day 3 and day 6 mirror one another. He separates earth from water. He makes land. And then day 6, he fills the land with animals and humankind. And so we see this theme of likeness. We see this theme of separating and filling. Seeing this theme of, I'm going to make something and I'm going to make something to complement it. And then we even see it with mankind. That's one of the main themes in Genesis 2, that God has Adam name all the animals. And what does Adam realize? There is no one like him. There is nothing like him. So God makes him go into this deep sleep, and then he makes him a helper. I'm kind of forgetting how it's said in English. I'm thinking in Spanish right now. Una ayuda idónea. So he makes him a companion, a helper to come alongside him. So everything in creation had a partner. Everyone had something like them. And even if we think about Genesis 1, when he talks about the birds, when he talks about humans, he goes, be fruitful and multiply according to your likeness. So the question is, what or who was the Sabbath's original partner? Because the Sabbath was the odd man out. And as we just read, we read Exodus 20, we read Deuteronomy 5, some verses from each one. The Sabbath's original partner, just as everything in creation had a partner, but the Sabbath kind of was like, oh, I don't have anyone to go with me. It was Israel. But then, as I said earlier, Sabbath wasn't just meant for Israel to enjoy. It was meant for all of mankind. And as Jesus says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So obviously God in his foreknowledge, knowing what was going to happen to his people, what was going to happen to the Israelites, it's like, hey, made this day, blessed it, made it holy. And it's a gift that's meant not just for Israel, because even foreigners, slaves, anyone who would dare enter the nation of Israel and dare to live with them and dare to serve their God also would observe the Sabbath. But then it's something that becomes a gift that was always meant to be a gift for all of mankind. And so the last point, overcoming unconquerable time. So this one we're going to be doing a little bit more reading from the book called The Sabbath. But again, my main point in this is I hope you guys see the Sabbath as a foretaste of eternity. That if we learn to participate, if we learn to enjoy the Sabbath, if we learn to practice it like a discipline, then it is going to help us to live and enjoy eternity. And so again, we're going to be doing a bit of reading for about 3 minutes. So I cannot recommend this book highly enough. It's called The Sabbath. Again, I'll put a QR code in the author at the end if you're interested in getting it. It's a short read. It's about 120, 140 pages, but it's a thin book. So I want you guys to listen to these words, because he does write, the author, somewhat philosophically. That was his background. Technical civilization is man's conquest of time. It is a triumph frequently achieved by sacrificing an essential ingredient of existence, namely time. In technical civilization, we expend time to gain space. To enhance our power in the world of space is our main objective. Yet to have more does not mean to be more. The power we attain in the world of space terminates abruptly at the borderline of time. And so I'll keep reading, I'll put it in simple man's terms. The meaning of the Sabbath is to celebrate time rather than space. 6 days a week, we live under the tyranny of things of space. On the Sabbath, we try to become attuned to holiness in time. It is a day on which we are called upon to share in what is eternal in time, to turn from the result of creation to the mystery of creation, from the world of creation to the creation of the world. Okay, so simpler terms. Again, Brian yesterday had us write our funerals at our Monday night Bible study. And Brian, something you had said was, in these old people's homes, that when people are facing death, they're not asking, hey, can you bring me my car one more time? There was that one car I really loved. Or can you bring me, my newest iPhone? Like, they're not asking for objects. They're asking for people. They're asking to those people who mean most of them, those relationships, to see people. And so the Sabbath, we'll get into this more in a moment, the following quotes. The Sabbath helps us to realize that ultimately, our venture in life, we should not be sacrificing time to always be gaining space, to always be building, to always be creating, but to learn again when to say enough and when to reflect on the creation that God has already finished. He who wants to enter the holiness of the day must first lay down the profanity of clattering commerce, of being yoked to toil. He must go away from the screech of dissonant days, from the nervousness and fury of acquisitiveness, and the betrayal and embezzling his own life. He must say farewell to manual work and learn to understand that the world has already been created and will survive without the help of man. 6 days a week we wrestle with the world, wringing profit from the earth. On the Sabbath we especially care for the seed of eternity planted in the soul. Think about Ecclesiastes 3, for example. The world has our hands, but our soul belongs to someone else. 6 days a week we seek to dominate the world. On the seventh day we try to dominate the self. The Sabbath is the day on which we learn the art of surpassing civilization. To gain control of the world of space is certainly one of our tasks. The danger begins when, in gaining power in the realm of space, we forfeit all aspirations in the realm of time. There is a realm of time where the goal is not to have but to be, not to own but to give, not to control but to share, and not to subdue but be in accord. Life goes wrong when the control of space, the acquisition of things of space, becomes our sole concern. And again, this is what the Egyptians were enforcing upon the Jews. Hey, keep building for us. Keep making civilization for us. And so when God takes them out, he goes, no, you will not live under the acquisition of things of space. You will not seek to just aspire to always gain more and more, but you will learn to be with me in a moment of time. You will learn to share. You will learn that life is so much more than just continuing to work and work and work. And obviously, I don't want to diminish, even in the commandment to keep the Sabbath, we do read the commandment to what? To work for 6 days. So absolutely work comes from God. But there is a moment, the seventh day, where God says, okay, now you need to say stop. Now you need to put it down. There are many who have acquired a high degree of political and social liberty, but only very few who are not enslaved to things. This is our constant problem. How to live with people and remain free. How to live with things and remain independent. All right, that's cool. And this one, I feel like, is really the most beautiful of everything that the author said. Shabbat comes with its own holiness. We enter not simply a day, but an atmosphere. My father cites the Zohar. The Sabbath is the name of God. We are within the Sabbath rather than Sabbath being within us. For my father, the question is how to perceive that holiness. Not how much to observe, but how to observe. Strict adherence to the laws regulating Sabbath observance doesn't suffice. The goal is creating the Sabbath as a foretaste of paradise. The Sabbath is a metaphor for paradise and a testimony to God's presence. In our prayers, we anticipate a messianic era that will be a Sabbath, and each Shabbat prepares us for that experience. Unless one learns how to relish the taste of Sabbath, one will be unable to enjoy the taste of eternity in the world to come. And so, every Sabbath, and I'm going to get into this a little more, I'm going to share what Hannah and I do, if you guys want to take some of those ideas. But as I journal every Sabbath, after I read this book, this was something I had journaled for myself. I said, if I do not Sabbath, I dismiss what God has sanctified. I miss out on his blessing and miss experiencing some of his heart. And again, I ask that question. When we don't treat what is holy what God has made holy, what is that? Usually we say that's desecrating, profaning something. If I do not Sabbath, I miss out on God's gift for us and may be prone to basing my worth on my work. If I don't Sabbath, I tell God I can do more in 7 days than what he can do through me in 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. Similar to the tithing principle. Oh God, I can do more with 100% of my money than what you can do with 90% of it. In essence, I fool myself into maximizing and conquering time. The Sabbath for me is a foretaste of an eternity when God gives us endless time. We will never beat time, but it will cease to best us as we live in eternal rest, learning when to say enough with our work and enjoy the fruit of our labor. And so just some further things for you guys to consider, and the first point is actually a topic we'll get into more next week. But when we think about Jesus and his words in Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, he makes it very clear. He says he came to fulfill, not to abolish the law and the prophets. And what is one way that he fulfilled them? He rightly interpreted, rightly observed the law and the prophets. He still honored and fulfilled the Sabbath, and that was something that he had a conflict with the teachers of the law, because there was all these interpretations about what was permitted, what was not permitted to do on the Sabbath. So Jesus came in correcting those interpretations. But he was still faithful to do the Sabbath. Again, we read 7 miracles that Jesus performed on the Sabbath, and that was, again, an issue that the teachers of the law had with him. Hey, it's not permitted to perform a miracle. And Jesus, again, gets into this whole discussion. And I encourage you to read Mark 2 if you're unfamiliar with the story. So Jesus set an example for us. In the early church, again, Sabbath just moved from Friday night to Saturday night to Sunday, because obviously the Lord's Day, Resurrection Day. But it was still something that a lot of Christians recognized in the early church. Jesus showed and taught us what is acceptable to do on the Sabbath. And on top of all that, again, something that we've already seen, it's a sanctified, it's a holy reality rooted in creation, God's order and design. It even precedes the giving of the law. So in the same way that we look at Adam and Eve, in the same way that we go, God made it very clear. There's man and there's female. There's male and female. Even though the world wants to tell us there's more than male and female, even though the world wants to tell us that marriage is so much more than one woman, one man for life, we can look all the way to creation, and even before the law was given, said this was God's design. It's the same with the Sabbath, that it is something that precedes the law. And ultimately, I hope that we don't use the Sabbath, the pursuit of good, as an excuse to abolish the day of Sabbath or the day of rest. What do I mean by that? That people will still do the work of the ministry. And again, it's a real struggle for a lot of pastors because they work on Sundays, and Sundays are supposed to be Sabbaths for a lot of Christians. But it's, okay, in one moment, am I going to find a moment of rest? And instead of always pursuing good, when do I need to learn and see that pursuing the Sabbath, fulfilling the Sabbath, is good in and of itself? So for Hannah and I, I'll wrap up here now in the next few minutes. For Hannah and I, this is something, we don't have it printed up now, but we used to have it printed up in our house. It's something Hannah made, but there's 4 things that I will remind myself almost every Sabbath, 4 things that we say. So she made this graphic on Canvas. So Mark 2 is Jesus' words when he said to not only his disciples, but to the teachers of the law, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And so the 4 things we say we do, we're going to rest, we play, no work, and we ultimately remember that God loves us. That again, in the same way that God loved Israel, his first bride, not because of their work, but just because he loved them, that he loves us too. Not because of our work, but because he made us his image bearers. And so, again, just some ideas for you guys to think about as you, and really, I guess my hope for this is for you guys to go out and not only hear from me, but maybe talk to one another. Because I think Seth and Marcel, you guys had said for Sabbath, you guys, don't use electricity, you just use candles or something like that at one point. Like you become a little bit Amish, and you're like, no electricity, And so I want you guys, if there's people in here who are like, hey, yeah, we practice Sabbath or we've done it before, talk to them too. Like, pick from their brains. But I just want to give you guys some ideas about what Hannah and I do. So besides the 4 primary things, some things we also intentionally do on the Sabbath. We have an extended time with the Lord, extended quiet time. I personally disconnect from my phone, so usually our Sabbaths are Sunday night to Monday night. Some of you have texted me during that time period, and I usually get to you on Tuesday. We lay hands on Eliana, and we pray the priesthood prayer in number 6. I don't know if this is true. I haven't verified it, but in a book I just read recently, the author had said that Jews every Sabbath will lay their hands on their children and pray the priesthood prayer, which if you guys know the song, The Blessing, that's the priesthood prayer. Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you. So that's something we do every Sabbath. We, again, order out or we'll eat leftovers, and we use paperware and plastic utensils because we're like, nope, we're not washing dishes. We want to minimize how many things we have to clean for the next day. And really, it's just a day of family for the 3 of us, and we typically end it with our Monday night Bible studies. And so if you're interested in the book that I had quoted, again, it's the best literature I think I've read on the Sabbath. This is the author. The QR code will take you to the Amazon page. He's already passed, but Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, he was a leading thinker and Jewish philosopher and rabbi in the 20th century. And so again, I find it fascinating because in his book, he doesn't believe in Jesus Christ. He's a Jew, but he does believe in a Messiah to come. And so it's very interesting hearing him talk about how the Sabbath is a foretaste of paradise, of a messianic era to come. I'm like, man, you don't believe in Jesus, but you still hold to the idea of a messianic era to come. And I'm like, how much more should that speak to us who do know that Jesus is the Messiah? And then these are some other recommended resources. So the first book, The Emotionally Healthy Leader, that book was really what kickstarted me into practicing Sabbaths when I was living in Los Angeles in 2021. And so all 4 of these books, I haven't read all of them. Like if you see Charlie Kirk, Stop in the Name of God, Why Honoring the Sabbath Will Transform Your Life. It was a book he was writing that's actually coming out in December. So his organization's still going to publish it even after his death. But he talked about it earlier this year, like, hey, I'm writing this book on the Sabbath. And the other two books I haven't personally read, but people I really trust have read them, and they have highly recommended them. So that's why I put them up there. So it is 10:20 on the dot.